Alright, action RPG enjoyers, let's talk about it. Dragonkin the Banished, is it worth picking up the early access? Was a very frequently asked question while I was playing the game. As someone that really likes action RPGs, specifically Diablo and Path of Exile, I always like to see what's coming around the corner. So I was really hyped up when I heard Dragonkin was coming out in early access. By the way, this is a buy-in early access, so it's set up to be $20 as of right now. But as far as the game goes, there are a lot of really cool elements in the game, but there's a lot of stuff that is still, I would say, cooking here. So here's my review and my thoughts on the game. So first off, is it worth 20 bucks? Well, for me, I got a few hours out of the campaign. Depending on how fast you are, it's anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. But for the most part, most of it is just walking from point to point. There's not any really big set pieces or anything that really separates this from any other action RPG. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, though. It just means that, you know, as far as like innovation, this is always something that I look for in action RPG. So here's my character's inventory. Here you guys can see. This is, by the way, at Endgame. I'm only level 17, but this is where you start to do Endgame because the campaign, they're still working on it, but they do give you access to Endgame. However, as far as the loot goes, you can see pretty much most of my items are all common or uncommon here, and basically this is our gear, and I'll show you kind of what like the stats or the affixes look on the item in a moment here, but this is just kind of like your generic, you know, action RPG in terms of like what's here. In terms of offense, defense, you have HP, you also have resistances, like everything is here, right? The thing that would make this game different a little bit is the Ancestral grid system. So how it works is that you have this pet with you 24/7, and this pet can actually be modified to kind of work well with your skills. They call it symbiosis, and you can basically have some sort of synergy. You can see the skill that I have over here, which is the ethereal dart, can actually be modified by all these other things that are adjacent to it. And you have this grid system, and you're going to be unlocking extra sockets as you progress in the game. Specifically, you can see these little numbers for the levels here, but you're going to be getting more and more of these. So it kind of incorporates the idea to kind of build your own skill. This is awesome. I think this is one of the coolest features of the game, and this is something that would separate this game from other action RPGs. Technically, I would say Undecember honestly did this one first, but there is a little bit more play with here because you have these other modifiers that are permalinked, so then you are forced to use them. If that's a good or bad thing, you guys can let me know your thoughts on that. But I think that each individual support gem, think of it kind of like what's ever adjacent to it being a support gem. If you've played Path of Exile, it's kind of like that basically. However, if it is adjacent to another one, then you could use the same support in a sense, if that makes sense, when you have them like kind of touching each other in another skill, which is cool. I like that idea for sure. However, while leveling, it feels like you can only really invest into like 1 or 2 skills, which would be cool to be able to invest into a ton of them. And because you also have to utilize your dragon skills, it kind of limits you in a sense because the board only has so much. So you do kind of have to think about what skill do you actually want to utilize. And you could actually utilize multiple of the same support gems, so to speak, because it has this little lightning bolt, and some of the mods kind of have, think of it kind of like rarity on the support that it would be giving you, and each certain thresholds you'll get another like projectile or like whatever the case may be with the support gem. It's actually a really cool system. I think that they need a little bit more flexibility. Allow this to be very big early on so then players can experiment versus you're kind of stuck with the same skill for a very, very long time. That's at least how I felt until I got to Endgame. You can see that there are actually different ancestral grids depending on the class that you play. There's different orientations, which I think is actually a cool idea. The attribute points, how it works in the game, you can put into basically you have your stats that you kind of see in other video games, but the stat points actually have a breakpoint. When you receive enough stats over here, you can see as far as the attributes, when I get to these certain thresholds, you can see this number like 45, you can see 70, 100. If I was to put that many points into this category, right, whether it be dex, you know, int, all of these things, strength, I will get to select one of these bonuses. So there's like 3 different bonuses on like this 100, and I can choose one. This one just makes so we just do more damage. Some of these are more interesting than others. They can activate things. Your pet also levels up, and your pet also has the same sort of passive tree where you can get extra damage. So not only are you getting damage by putting in these points into whatever category that you want to put them in, but then at certain breakpoints, again, the first one is at 10, so like you're going to want to try to get those 10s early on all of them. So it kind of facilitates the idea that you want some points into other ones, because going from, let's say, 10 to 100, it takes so dang long because it's going to require so many skill points that it's going to kind of encourage you to be a little bit more balanced versus just going for one thing. However, there could be one really big node that can really shift up your class in terms of damage or something. So I like this idea. These are all really cool things. Another thing I want to mention, I just want to show off the item here. So like I beat the entire game. I was doing endgame content and I was still getting whites and blues, which would be uncommon over here, and I think that that is not enough loot. That's the biggest problem that I see currently with this game in early access. Now keep in mind, everything is in early access that I'm talking about, but that is a huge deal with an action RPG. You have to have loot in your game. If your player is getting to endgame and doing the endgame mechanics and still getting common and uncommon items, I just kind of want to stop playing the game. That's honestly how I felt with the game. Like, if I'm doing endgame content, just give me legendaries. It's early access. Let us play with stuff, man. This is the perfect time for people to have fun, not spend so much time grinding. In fact, it got to the point where I just simply stopped playing, to be honest with you guys. This is like the world map over here, and this is like kind of where you can go. There is like a campaign, and this is also the like city. So the city is really cool in this game. You get to actually upgrade certain elements of it, and you can see we can unlock the ability to craft. There is some crafting in the game. Basically, you have the materials and it RNGs and spits something out depending on what you put in. So those are kind of the things that I want to go over in terms of the overview. Now I want to go ahead and give the game some like numerical scores here. So honestly, if you're wondering, just kind of as like a quick, is this game worth purchasing? I would say it still needs definitely more cooking. It definitely feels like a game in early access. One of the biggest areas that this game needs improvement on is the way that the game feels. As far as the campaign goes, you're basically just kind of walking from point A to point B. Again, no big set pieces, nothing to really define this game as something innovative in the new action RPG like genre here. This I like, it's cool, but again, Undecember technically did it first, so I gotta give them credit over there. But there is a little bit more with, I guess, the symbiosis with that. Again, you can like then link it with your pet. It's a really cool system, to be honest, but a lot of stuff is kind of just like numbers game. But as far as the graphics go, I felt like the world itself actually looked really good. Some of the animations definitely need some work, but as far as like graphic wise, I would say it's in like the PS4 / Xbox 360 era in terms of graphics, so anywhere between here is acceptable. But as far as graphics go, the world looks really good. I actually liked that it was relatively readable from a standpoint, because sometimes action RPGs get too much clutter. It's specifically on like the water area where I would say it's an area where like there's just kind of like a filter that is, because you're under the water, it's a little bit harder to see, but for the most part the graphics are totally fine. I would say it's in sort of like this era over here in terms of like the graphics. Another thing I want to mention, the first 20 minutes of this game, because they do want feedback, I'm going to give them feedback too. The first 20 minutes of this game, absolutely amazing, like a solid 8 out of 10. Like I really liked the first 20 minutes. Then you go to the campaign and it's a lot of very slow things, and in order to like activate certain things in the game, you can see how long that thing kind of takes, and then it's just monsters that go around you, like very basic things that you just would see that like instantly should be fixed in an action RPG. And think doors in general, monsters exploding on death, these things should honestly be removed. Most people that play action RPGs play for hundreds of hours. These are all kind of nuisances and things that I think could just be smoothed out. But anyways, that's what I would say the graphics are in terms of the graphics. It's not something super impressive. The world looks good, but the animations, again, like if I'm spinning around here, the character could kind of move. Again, I wasn't really impressed by the graphics, but the world looks good, if that makes any sense. It's just the characters and the animations. Again, keep in mind it's in early access, but I'm going to review it as is. So who's this game for? I would say it's definitely for adults in terms of like the way the theme is. It takes itself seriously. There's not like funny like moments really in the game. But how does the gameplay feel? This is where I gotta put it in. It feels like an early access game. It definitely needs a lot more work in terms of like how the game feels. I want it to feel punchy. This is the biggest thing that action RPGs need to get down. The biggest comparison I would say is if you compare, let's say, like Path of Exile 2 and Diablo 4, the games feel good. I'm talking about when you push the button, the response. It's not responsive, but it's just like the game doesn't feel weighted. Path of Exile 2 does this better than any action RPG right now in the market. It's the way that the game feels. The best example I would say is it feels sort of like Last Epoch. Don't get me wrong, I like Last Epoch, but the way the game feels, it's not on PoE 2's level. I'm talking about the weight of the game. That is a big thing that action RPGs, they almost never can get right for a lot of like the non-AAA games. This is a big deal. This is why specifically Path of Exile and Diablo have been dominating the action RPG genre. A lot of them never make the game have that action visceral combat that Diablo 4, Diablo 2, Diablo 1 actually has really good feel of the game, honestly, unless you're getting hit and you don't have fast hit recovery. Then it feels bad because you're just constantly getting, hit stun. But for the most part, this is a very important thing for action RPGs. It's probably one of the most critical things that they need to fix. If they can get this down and then fix the loot and fix the resistances, this game has a lot of potential. As far as the audio goes, I like the soundtrack for this game. This was really awesome. I would actually listen to it in the background. I know we're listening to like other action RPGs right now, but I think that there are really good few select songs. I probably wouldn't listen to it like on my own, but I would definitely use it for background music, like while streaming and stuff. I liked the audio. It was great. The music, some of the skills they work. I mean, it's nothing too crazy, but I really feel like the music in this game was actually really good. Anyways, as far as gameplay customization, I think it's pretty good. There is a pretty good amount of options for builds, but I haven't seen any uniques that completely change up the way I see it, because the legendary that I got just gave me some passive that would give us something for like super far later in the end game. But I would say that there's a good amount of options for builds, but I think in terms of early access, you got to give people loot, man. This is the biggest problem with the game, is that it feels way too much of a grind. For the difficulty of the game, it's pretty easy, I would say, for the most part. Like, things do a lot of damage. I think it is pretty dang hard, but this is where I want to go ahead and put it. The game feels like it's missing parts. Like, as in, resistances are a really, really, really big issue once you get to the end game. When you finish the campaign, you do the end game, you just get one-shotted sometimes, and it just feels so bad. I'm just like, dude, I can't fix my character because the loot that you're giving me is literally all white items. Like, this is a huge issue. It's basically, the loot is so terrible in this game in the early access state that I really want to stress this to the game developers. Fix this, fix the loot, and you could easily see a lot of people saying, okay, the game is, it's got potential, and they can see that this game has a future. But honestly, if they don't fix the loot and the end game, as far as like, once you finish the campaign, you go to end game, especially if you're not playing Barbarian, man, you just get like absolutely just deleted out of the game, and I hate how that feels. No one likes getting one-shotted. There's also like these little dragons that, it's actually a pretty big dragon, but they come out at the end game, and like during it, you're supposed to be able to kill a bunch of stuff, and it fills up a little bar, kind of like a greater rift in the very beginning. But there's like this particularly ice one that just like, it feels so bad to play because there's way too much overlaps. It's just, again, you get deleted way too hard. As far as the grind goes, man, there is a lot of backtracking in this game when you're going from one point to another point. Honestly, I didn't really like the campaign, to be straight up with you guys. The first 20 minutes of this game are absolutely amazing. Again, if I only played the first 20 minutes, I would say everyone go buy this game. If you like Diablo, if you like Path of Exile, buy this game 100%. First 20 minutes. After that, you do the campaign for a couple hours. I'm just like, it needs way more cooking, man. That's just, straight up how I feel about it. As far as the story goes, it's okay. It's nothing what I would consider like super special, but the first 20 minutes made the game seem super hype. Like, you're getting all these characters together, and then you party up, and then after the first like little like prologue, you're all walking together and you're doing this thing, and it seems okay. And then you get towards the later stages of the game, and then it becomes pretty good because you kind of find out more stuff about the game. I won't spoil it, but I think the story, it's pretty good for an action RPG. But again, if it's not a Deus Ex, I can't give it a Deus Ex score, but it's like good for action RPGs in terms of like the story, in terms of like how, I guess, the writing is what I should say, versus like showing cinematics or anything. I think that if they had more cinematics, it would have felt a little bit more complete. But again, it's early access, I get it. But I think the story in terms of the writing was pretty cool because of something else that you find out in the game. But as far as the game time, I pretty much felt like I was pretty much done with the campaign, and then like, I don't want to do the campaign again. I didn't really care too much about the end game. For me, this is a game where I would say most players will spend, it's either you play the prologue, like, dude, you're really hyped, and then you start playing more of the campaign. You're like doing the campaign. It's like, go here, kill 5 of these, go click on 5 of these flowers. It didn't feel very innovative. Again, this is a huge thing. If you're wanting people to play an action RPG again and again, which is kind of how these games are designed, you need to make it so that the gameplay feels so good. Once I got to the end game, I just kind of stopped playing. That is a huge issue with an action RPG. You want people to play your end game, right? And then as far as price, it is $20, and I would say if it was $10, I'd be a little bit more lenient. But $20, man, I can go get a game from 5-10 years ago that's really solid. But I would say if they really want people to actually be okay with their price tag, because I don't think $20 is like super expensive or anything, but in terms of value, you do have technically a lot of end game content that you can technically repeat again and again, but it's just straight up like a nightmare or what is it called, a greater rift from Diablo. You kill stuff, it builds up a bar, you go and you fight a boss. Unfortunately, when you open up the boss loot, it's all commons. Yeah, I get it, later in the game you can maybe get much better loot, but it got to the point where I just wasn't enjoying myself in terms of the end game. So I would say For people that really, really like action RPGs, again, if you play the first 20 minutes, you will be like, dude, this game is so awesome. And then you start to play, I don't know, I just feel like if there's nothing else to play and I really wanted to play an action RPG, I think that there's just better options right now. I want to wait until it actually kind of comes out to give you guys a better review of, is it worth buying right now? Because right now I feel like it's still undercooked. I still got it on my radar, but I want to see if the game actually fixes the combat and the loot. If it doesn't fix those two things, I would say this game is just going to fall by the side, and it's just going to be another game where it's like, okay, we still play Path of Exile and Diablo and the rest of the action RPGs. Well, we play Last Epoch maybe once in a while, or maybe some other game pops up once in a while, but I would say it might be just a game that kind of just falls off. Like, you know, I don't know if you guys remember Wolfson. That game was pretty cool when it launched, but that game had a lot of issues with bugs. Speaking of bugs, but yeah, as far as the price goes, I don't think it's crazy for 20 bucks in terms of like what they have. In terms of the vision, it seems like it's pretty big, but you gotta have loot in your action RPG. You cannot beat the entire game and still have all commons for the most part. I had like one or two like blue items. Again, that's the biggest problem with this game right now. But yeah, I would say just in terms of the price, for most people, I would say it's not really ready. I would wait for it to cook up, but we'll have to wait and see. And I'll update you guys on it because I like action RPGs. I want this game to be good. Anyways, as far as bugs, I would say there's like some minor bugs. Some people are reporting crashing, but I would still say the game is super playable. It didn't really have too many issues with that. It's the questing that becomes a little bit rough because it's like one of the things was like find this one thing. I went around everywhere looking for it. I wouldn't really consider it a bug, but it's like as far as questing, it just wasn't as smooth as it could have been. Now, what am I going to give this as far as a review score, like out of a 10? If I had a review in its early access state, right, where like Path of Exile 2 in early access, man, that is probably like a 9 or 10. Like for an early access game, this game, you could definitely feel that, like there is really cool ideas with specifically like the Ancestral grid. If they can make this way larger and fix the loot, that is their biggest issue right now, is fixing the loot and making this much bigger. Because again, throughout the entire game, I played with 3 skills. In an action RPG, you want players to be, oh, I got this new skill, I'm gonna try it out. And every time I was trying out the skills, a lot of them just kind of felt like, because I didn't have all the correct like links there, I just really couldn't use it, right? It's like in Path of Exile, you have like, well, PoE 1, you kind of have like one main skill, right? And you keep on utilizing that skill. And, you know, that's not necessarily bad with an action RPG, but like as you're leveling through the campaign, you need to give people a bunch of skills to kind of feel like, oh, cool, I'm leveling up, I'm getting more powerful, I could try this. I didn't really feel like that with this game. It's specifically the loot. I think it really needs a lot of work. If I was to give this game like a score, in terms of it being average, the problem is I have to give it a below average score. And the reason why is because I did not like the loot. The loot felt incredibly bad. The resistances felt incredibly bad. There's a lot of stuff here that just feels too much in early access. But then I'm like looking at like the Ancestral grid, I'm like, okay, that's a really cool idea. And like, I'm like, I want to give it a 6 over here. But then I go back to the action combat and then I'm like, okay, maybe it's more like a 5. But like, I look at it at the standpoint of like even average action RPGs that are like free to play, that I'll play like, you know, random ones from overseas, and like I'll play them for a little bit more. And like I felt like once I spent about 5-ish hours in like this early access, because technically I had the game like a while back ago too, which had also some endgame content, I feel like it's just too much of the same that we've already seen in the action RPG genre. So honestly, I would say if I had to give it a score, you know, I want this game to be good, but right now I would say it's like a 4 out of 10, man. It feels below average. Again, I know I'm mentioning it like 1,000 times, but I'm telling you, when you play the game and you finish the entire game, you cannot give your players common loot as drops towards the end game, okay? That is the biggest area. That and the action combat, and then also letting people use more skills. I think if they can fix that, which, you know, again, it's just like probably a knob for like the drop increased loot rate, because they also have that thing where as you increase the difficulty, you get more loot. But I never had enough fun to actually progress to get to that point. So I want to say that it is an easy 6 if they can just crank up that knob. Whatever the loot drop chance is from the higher difficulties, let that exist. This is early access. Let people have fun. Let people experiment. If they fix that, like I want to give it right now again a 4, but it's such an easy thing to fix that loot, but also making the game easier to not get one-shotted, because you don't really have access to loot, which gives you the ability to not get one-shotted, which again is pretty much the biggest issue as of right now. So there it is. Those are all my numerical scores right now for the game in terms of like, you know, what I would give it. And if you want to know, do I recommend the game? If you really love action RPGs and you kind of want to mess around something for like 5 hours, maybe you can go further than I did. But I just didn't have enough fun because the loot was so dry that I just didn't want to play. And that is a big issue. If you guys remember when PoE had you know, a league where there was no loot, a lot of people were complaining. That is the biggest issue, and that's what it feels like. Keep in mind the game's in early access. access, but I got to review it in early access to give them some feedback. But that's my thoughts on Dragonkin. I would say, honestly, at the end of the day, wait to see if it cooks up something better, and I'll update you guys if they have some massive update with the game. Specifically, just fixing the loot is the biggest issue right now. But anyways, I would wait until they are going to be adding more content and make the game feel a lot better. And again, loot is the biggest issue. Anyways, subscribe if you guys want to see the update to that and you're new here, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. If you played, let me know your thoughts. What would you give it out of a 10? I'm signing out. Peace out, guys.